Session. My name is Sheila Fitzgerald, and I am the Mayor of Roddickton Bodarm and the M&L President. We are so pleased to have with us tonight 4 special guests. 2 are in studio, the leader of the PC Party, Ches Crosby, and the leader of the ND Party, Alison Coffin. Online, joining us by Zoom, we have the Minister for Municipal Affairs, Minister Derek Bennett, on behalf of Premier Fury, and we also have the leader for NL Alliance, Graydon Pelly. If you'd like to read their bibliographies, it's been a long day. Please visit our conference website at nlconference.ca. So welcome to all of you. Now this session, we have 4 parts, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the question to each leader, and then at that point, you'll have 2 minutes to answer. I will prompt you, so you have to wait for your turn. That'll be your opportunity to go. And then your responses will be timed, 2 minutes, and then at that point you have to stop talking. So we are going to have a timer, so you can kind of judge yourselves accordingly. At the end of the 4 sections, you will have an opportunity for closing remarks. They'll also be 2 minutes each. Please remember that this is not a debate, not by any means. Leaders will have the opportunity to respond to questions, but please don't respond to each other. I will remind our panelists that M&L does have a respectful behavior policy that we use at all of our M&L activities and events, and it certainly applies here as well. All right, without further ado, let's get to the questions. Welcome back, and certainly welcome to our panelists. We're really glad that you were able to join us, and so we'll get started now. Our first question is going to be about the economy. And so I'll begin each question with a short preamble, and then from there we'll take our turns and go through your answer. Okay, number 1, Newfoundland and Labrador is in a difficult economic situation. There are tensions within and among our past and present economic engines, like oil and gas, the fishery, tourism, public transportation, public service industry, and of course that's to scale small and large businesses. COVID and other pressing realities like climate change are challenging our economic realities. So the question is, and we're going to start off with you, Minister Bennett. The question is, where should we be going economically, and how do we get there?
Thank you, President Fitzgerald. Pleased to join you from the beautiful and scenic district of Louisbourg-Twillingate. I'm hoping that the audio and visual is working quite well. Newfoundland and Labrador is well positioned to capitalize on resource potential that we have and become a significant player in a variety of industries. Opportunities exist in our oil and gas sector, and such as those that made possible by the discoveries that Equinor just found. Our mining industry sees great potential with recent mines operating like Tacora and Marathon Gold. Our tourism industry, which is contributing over $1 billion annually to our economy, has so much great potential. Our technology sector sees significant growth in our province, and our traditional industries, as you mentioned, agriculture, fishery, and forestry, continue to be strong. New ideas for economic diversification and changes to our delivery methods are required to allow our province to move forward in a sustainable and effective manner. Premier Fury recently established his economic recovery team to address the fiscal and economic concerns and include some of our brightest leaders who are recognized locally, provincially, and internationally. People with extensive experience in areas such as technology, finances, oil and gas, labor, and public service. People like Dame Moya Green, Zita Cobb, Moya Cow, David Vardy, and Chief Michel Joe. Our government has priorities investments that will support economic recovery. Just to name a couple, we've invested over $600 million in infrastructure funding, $30 million recently in a small business assistance program that includes small business and the arts sector. $25 million just invested recently in the tourism and hospitality sector to help the tourism industry that has been suffering.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Bennett. All right, so we're going to pass it over now to Mr. Crosby. Where should we be going economically, and how should we be getting there?
Sheila, these are great questions. You probably had the brains trust putting them together. Very challenging, and I thank you for it. I want to thank you as the president and the board of directors and all of the other leaders, because you're an organization of leaders, for inviting me to this leaders panel discussion. And so tackling that first question, I tackle it in two ways. One is a matter of substance. What we need is we need an economic plan, and we need to focus on jobs, and we need to focus on jobs, and we need to focus on jobs, in case you didn't hear me the first time. So it's all about jobs, because jobs and investment and growth create the wealth, create the tax revenue that enable the folks in your organization to run their municipalities and provide the services that people are in such desperate need of. So the first part of my substantive answer is jobs. We need a fair deal with Ottawa, and we all know that while our neighbors like Nova Scotia and like New Brunswick are getting $2 billion a year from federal transfers, equalization, we don't get anything. That has to be changed. And we need a government in Ottawa that supports the offshore industry rather than undermines it. And as a matter of style, we need a champion. The province needs a champion. And Municipalities NL and all the municipalities and the people in your organization, they need a champion. And when I become premier, I'll be that champion for you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Crosby. All right, Allison, I'd like to hear what your answer is. Where should we be going economically, and how do we get there?
Excellent question. Thank you for having me here. It's very much a pleasure. I'm reminded of a question. I used to teach a course called Structure and Problems of the Newfoundland Economy. And for fun, my last question was always, if you were in charge, what would you do to make Newfoundland and Labrador better? You have 20 minutes. And I always got some interesting answers. But there's two key focuses for any decisions we need to make on policy that I believe will work for our province. And the first thing is keep more dollars in Newfoundland and Labrador. One of our biggest exports is money, mostly because we import things. So being able to provide things locally is very, very important, and that will keep that money circulating in our economy. The other thing we need to do is make decisions that even out our income. We have a distribution of income where there's a number of people who are quite wealthy, and then there's an awful lot of people who are much less well off. So to manage to make decisions that will even out how that distribution is better, then everyone else will have more money, they'll be able to participate more fully in the economy, they'll be able to afford more things in their life. And that's the types of ways in which we need to make those decisions. To make those decisions, we need to be able to support regional economic development, absolutely. And I know that once upon a time when we had our Red Bees functioning, they were wonderful conduits. We also need to set up a permanent green fund to help facilitate venture capital for local businesses and organizations who want to develop sustainable green economic initiatives. And that can be in alternative energy sources, but it can also be in environmental protection. Oh my goodness, I've got 26 seconds. Broadband internet will increase our accessibility to other markets, and that's really going to help the way in which we communicate, but also how we sell to the rest of the world. 14 seconds. Oh, I can do more. Sustainable inshore fishery, allocating metric quotas to owner-operated and Indigenous groups, and construction of new fish plants where all fish plants can process all species. Boom.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, Graydon. How should we be going economically, and where should we be going economically, and how should we get there?
Thanks again, and I join with the rest of the leaders this evening saying thank you for the invite to be here this evening, and congratulations on another great convention. I know it's a different one this time, but it looks like it's going quite well. As everyone is aware, we are in a financial situation in this province like we've never seen the like of before. There's no point tonight in spending time on blaming who's the fault and why we're here the way we are. But one thing I have to say is that we must learn lessons from the past. And if we don't learn these lessons, there's no point in having this conversation here this evening. But I believe, like many others throughout this province and many government leaders and people that I've talked to is that we have to get our spending under control. It's fine to have lots of money coming into the province. We want more money, but if we're going to keep spending like we've always done, there's no point. So we have to get our spending under control. And we understand that when it comes time for the belt to be tightened, people get uncomfortable. However, if we are going to have a future for this province, we have to certainly get control of our fiscal situation. I think it's time for us to just stop looking for bailouts and quick fixes. I believe it's time for us to sit down and make a plan, a long-term plan, whereby we're going to have a sustainable future for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. We must make plans and follow through on them. And I believe that we have the wherewithal to make these decisions. I believe we can get out of the fiscal rut we're in. I believe that having the economic recovery team outside of the House of Assembly is a good step in getting this done. But I believe the important thing is that this committee must collaborate with people that are in the trenches, as it were, to get a clear picture of exactly what's going on within our province and listen to their suggestions and their ideas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pelly. Okay, we're going to move right along. Now, next thing we're going to talk about is infrastructure. Infrastructure is essential to the well-being of our communities. We have a lot of dated, inadequate infrastructure throughout the province and within our municipalities. We know that addressing these infrastructure gaps requires significant investment. Estimates indicate that drinking water and wastewater alone will each require hundreds of millions of dollars each. So the question is, what are your thoughts on strategically moving toward with municipal infrastructure? How should we be approaching this? And of course, who pays for it? So we're going to start with yourself, Mr. Crosby.
Well, thanks again for a great question. Very challenging question. And I know that municipalities have great challenges in providing the things to people, the people whose welfare they're concerned with, that make their lives better. And there's enormous need out there. So how do you satisfy that need? It's through stimulating the economy, through having an economic recovery plan, and through having a plan for jobs and jobs and jobs, because that's where wealth comes from. The wealth to pay for the things that municipalities need, that government needs to provide services for people. As well, when it comes to infrastructure, it's a big field. It's everything from roads that need mending. It could include infrastructure like broadband, internet, and proper cell phone coverage. It covers the whole broad field. And the important thing is for government to be in touch with closely and listening to municipal leaders and to your organization, which speaks for municipal leaders. Making these decisions in St. John's is probably not the best way to do it. What we need is to be more in touch in the provincial government with the grassroots of the province and with the people who are most in touch with the grassroots of the province, and that's the folks in your organization, Municipalities NL, and in the various municipalities. And as Premier, that's what I do. I would be in constant touch with and listen to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crosby. All right, Ms. Kaufman.
Okay, thank you. We know that the big issue here is funding. Absolutely. So time and time again, we hear that there's a lack of resources or lack of sources of funding to fulfill a lot of their obligations. Our policy is to work with municipalities to develop a funding formula that is both sustainable and attainable. Municipal operating grant fund is failing the communities, so we believe that we need a formula that is based on need and the real cost of providing those services. We are also very open to exploring new opportunities for municipal governments generating their own revenue. I know we've had a number of discussions, and I've been listening to a lot of the things that you have been doing. Municipal income and sales tax, grants in lieu of taxes, and a variety of other things I know have been discussion items that your association has discussed. you are the folks who know what is happening. So I take guidance from municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador on how that might work, and we're open to that. I do believe that if the federal government is regulating things, then they also need to support the regulations that municipalities need to implement. So I think when they are imposing greater regulations, then they must also bring that with additional funding. And I think that's a very reasonable expectation. I think we also perhaps should explore a public transit system. I think that can improve access to a lot of affordable and accessible services, and it helps stimulate the economy by promoting travel. And because we are so remote, that's a very reasonable thing. You don't go wrong with additional travel. Regionalization, I know, has been a topic on the table, and that's going to, depending on your advice on how that might work, regionalization will help with economies of scale. The more number of people who need a service, the easier it is to share out those costs. The other thing that I think is I'd like to have some discussions with you, and I can do this, mechanisms that you'd like to use to decide on the infrastructure funding of who gets what, at what time, and when.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to turn the tables over to you, Mr. Pelly. What are your thoughts?
I've had the opportunity over the last number of years to talk to lots of municipal leaders, and I've also observed throughout the province in my travels the need for upgrades in infrastructure. There are so many smaller municipalities that just can't afford the cost of what needs to be done. And again, because of the demographics of our population and the decline of young families staying in these areas, the tax base is not there to keep up. I believe that regionalization can no longer be ignored. For some reason, we seem to mention this concept quite often, but action always seems to evade it. I believe no matter where people are living in this province, they are entitled to a safe and a healthy environment. I've heard the concerns about regulations that are being put in place by governments, and governments know that many rural areas cannot afford the required changes. Therefore, I believe that municipalities and provincial government must work together also with the federal government to create formulas that work for municipalities. And we know that one size does not fit all. We know that no matter what the size, they must provide a means whereby necessary infrastructure upgrades, and people must know that they are going to be kept safe and healthy. And the bottom line is that if municipalities cannot provide proper infrastructure, then the governments have no choice but to make it happen. And the bottom line is people have to be cared for no matter where they live in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pelly. All right, we're going to turn it over to you, Minister Bennett.
Well, thank you, Sheila. And it's definitely a very important question. And for those out listening, my experience prior to being elected in 2015, I had the opportunity to work with the municipal government for 25 years with the town of Lewisporte. And I can speak firsthand and know the challenges that municipalities face with regards to trying to upkeep municipal infrastructure, recreation facilities, and other services within the community that are important to create a stable lifestyle for residents of the area. Recently, as you are aware, our government done some restructuring, and we have 3 ministers responsible that we sit at the cabinet table that will be working and advocating for municipalities and that. So I think that's a great step forward in moving forward with some programs. As you alluded to, these projects are very costly. And in many cases, municipal governments do find it very difficult to come up with the necessary funding to cost share on these programs. And we've been advocating very strongly, our government, with our federal colleagues, in that to increase our funding opportunities, to get more funds, in order to limit the amount of funding that provincial and municipal governments have to put in place. We're very successful on working with MNL recently to get $27.4 million for the Safe Restart program, which is money that can use unconditionally within municipal governments. They can use it towards wastewater programs or water and sewer programs, and also use it for other programs that they need, or to offset some of the cost of future programming. We've also just announced recently, we realized the strain that COVID has put on recreation facilities. So recently we announced the $600,000 in municipal funding to assist pools and arenas, and each municipality can apply for a $10,000 grant.
All right, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Minister Bennett. Okay, we're going to move right along now to decision making. The third question. Municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, is continually advocating for having a seat at the decision-making table on issues that impact, of course, us. All too often, this is not the case, and we find out what decisions are made after the fact when everyone else does. Okay, I want to know, what are your suggestions on how to rectify this issue? And to start, Ms. Coffin, we'll start with you first.
Lovely, thank you. One of the things that comes to mind almost immediately was it was very important when we chose our critic for municipalities for it to be someone outside the overpass. So Jordan Brown is doing that, and he provides an incredible regional perspective, which is so important. And of course, more municipalities are outside the overpass than I think are represented with the few districts that we have. So I think that's a key thing. To go back to my last point on the last question, I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with you about mechanisms that you think will work for how do we decide on who gets funding or what type of infrastructure needs to be funded and when they will get that and how we're going to allocate that out. That's not something I know. I'm not the person who's going to implement that. If I'm making decisions in the House of Assembly, that's going to be colored by the fact that I'm sitting around with a pile of bureaucrats. When you come out into municipalities and you say, well, we need to put pen to paper or we need to put a backhoe in the ground, you know the practical problems that are associated with that and what works and what doesn't work. So I think that bringing municipalities to the table to have that practical discussion while we were looking at the more philosophical discussion of what the legislation might do or what some of the decisions might be is very important. I think multi-year infrastructure plan would be a very good idea for municipalities. And certainly one of the things that we talked about was part of our campaign last year, came out of our discussions with municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador. And we firmly believe that you need a seat at the table when decisions are being made that you have to implement. So I think that is absolutely vital. We need a mechanism, a working relationship where you are notified and consulted on all legislation, excuse me, when policy changes that are affecting your local economies. I think that is absolutely vital, and we fully support local governments having a strong voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Pelly, we're going to go over to you. What are your suggestions on how we can rectify the current situation whereby municipalities, oftentimes across the province, learn about decisions that are made about them or for them after the fact?
I'm assuming that's for me.
It
now.
is?
We lost you, but we have you back.
Okay.
Mr. Great. Thank you. I've always believed and said that far too many decisions that government makes are made behind closed doors without the proper consultation and deliberation from those who are affected by it most. And we have heard the reports that even elected officials in the House of Assembly are not aware of some of the decisions that have been made. And if this is so, my question is, how much more is it happening to entities outside the House of Assembly? I'm a firm believer that discussions happening around municipalities must include representatives from MNL. This makes common sense, and I believe this should apply to any department within government. We must realize that municipal government is the first level that residents go to for support. I believe that if these were regional governments, then many rural areas would have a stronger voice and a better path to seeing their areas grow. I think about the businesses and the resources, the entrepreneurs, the list goes on. And who better to be advocating for an area than a regional government with a representation at the table when decisions are being made that so much affect the lives of people in the local area. And I believe that these representations will bring the interest of all residents, and who better to bring the interest of all residents, and who better to understand what makes sense for their local municipality than their local regional government. And who better to have sitting at a table that's making decisions that affect them so much than a representative from their area and a representative from MNL. I believe that has been one of the biggest deterrents over the years is the lack of people who are being left out of conversations that impact their lives so very much. So I believe you ought to have representation at the table where decisions are made that affect you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Pelly. All right, Minister Bennett, what are your thoughts?
Well, thank you very much again, President Fitzgerald. As you know, I've been in the role as minister for 9-10 weeks now, and to be honest with you, I thought we have a great working relationship with MNL and also PMA. We welcome the opinions and ideas that on government initiatives, and we ensure that we work with those needs to meet the needs of municipalities. I'm sure there's more that we can do, and there's obviously things that we can do. We're sitting at the table to share more ideas and to come up with different initiatives within that will support and benefit municipalities. Some of the work that we have done over the last few months is obviously MNL has been a strong advocate for the ban on single-use plastic shopping bags, which I'm proud to say that we implemented in the 1st of October. The Premier has committed to the annual forum with municipal leaders again. That our previous Premier, Dory Ball, has started. During the onset of COVID-19, MNL had a direct line with government through our Department of Environment, Climate Change and Municipalities. And we addressed all the questions that you had. But more importantly, we relied on municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, to help to get that message out and to make sure that residents in our communities knew what was happening during COVID-19. And that partnership proved to be very successful with the way that COVID-19 has been handled within Newfoundland and Labrador. We've also, Mr. Pelly referenced the regionalization, and as you're aware, we have a working committee with MNL and PMA, along with my Department of Environment, Climate Change and Municipalities, to identify ways to regionalize and provide regional services within Newfoundland and Labrador. Our Municipalities Act and our Cities Act. MNL is an active player at the table there, working with our government officials to make sure that we put forward the best possible Municipalities Act possible that will best represent the needs and the services of the residents of Newfoundland and Labrador.
All right.
Also,
Go ahead,
okay.
Sorry.
I could keep going.
Okay, we're good. Okay, Mr. Crosby.
I want to say hello to my colleagues, Derek there and Graydon, who's sporting a magnificent post-COVID beard, and Allison, although Allison and I encountered each other a little earlier today for Issues and Answers. We did a taping that's going to play on Sunday at 12 o'clock, Issues and Answers down at NTV. And I noticed that she still has the same magnificent shoes on. I don't know if your camera angles can cover it, but sometimes you might want to show it. And I want to just say that I've learned a lot from the times that I've been honored to attend events hosted by your organization, by NL. I went to the convention last year down at the Delta. I was at the Leaders Debate, and I've been honored to host your board of directors in the caucus room at Confederation Building for a meeting with my caucus. So thank you very much for all that. And again, I met Deirdre Walsh and had a little chat with her before we started. And I just want to say in a joking way that it would be my ambition as Premier to make her job, which is Director of Advocacy, and a lot of that, I'm sure, has to do with advocacy to the provincial government, to make her job unnecessary. Because when I'm Premier, I'm going to be the Premier for Municipalities NL.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crosby. All right, this is the final question of the day. We're going to talk about representation. Okay, our municipal council tables and our provincial legislature are not places of diverse representation. And we know that this might be the upcoming year for many elections on many levels, municipal, provincial, and possibly even federal. So the question that we have specifically is, what should we be doing to address this at the municipal level specifically? So we're going to actually start with you, Mr. Pelly.
Thank you very much. Very important question, very important discussion to be had for sure. I believe that the key to getting more diversity within any level of government is through education and making connections. More specifically for municipalities, getting into our schools to make presentations on the importance of getting involved is much easier today than ever. With the restrictions that are in place with the COVID pandemic, we find that there are so many more people having virtual meetings and making connections in so many different ways. Times are changing, and we must be willing to change with it by leveraging the available technology and engaging the youth. All youth need to know from a young age that their voices matter, no matter their ethnicity, no matter their gender, their orientation, or their identity. It's very important to have them involved for the future and for today. I strongly believe that when newcomers moving to our town, including those from other provinces and countries, are given the opportunity to have a voice and to feel like they have a stake in the community, it will be more attractive for them to stay and become permanent residents. And this can be done by having outreach programs available through the municipalities for anybody new coming into the area. I strongly feel that every municipality should have a liaison between the local municipality and any newcomers that come to our town. If we are going to survive as a province, and I am a firm believer in Newfoundland and Labrador, I am a strong believer in rural Newfoundland and Labrador. And I believe that if we are going to have a sustainable future for my children and your children and our grandchildren, we have to make sure that every person in our communities feel a part of the community, feel they have a voice, and every opportunity should be made for these people, the youth,
Okay.
and everyone to be a part of our local government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pelly. All right, Minister Bennett, we're going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, President Fitzgerald. The Fury administration is committed to reflecting the people that we represent, which makes diversity a priority and necessary among all elected officials, is vital to the success of our province. Our government recently is the first time to have a specific minister responsible for the status of women. And that minister is working on a number of initiatives, including establishing a co-chairing committee with the Premier's Roundtable on Gender Equality, and continuing to work on initiatives that's meant to encourage and support and retain women in leadership roles. And I do agree fully with the previous speaker, Mr. Pelly, that we have to do everything possible to have a diverse and gender equality government. This includes not just women in government, it also includes more Indigenous people involved, having more people with cross disabilities, and also gender diverse people. We have to continue to support women into municipal politics and also within provincial politics. As you know, right now we're less than 25% of our provincial legislature is made up of women, and we need to do more things. And our government have done such things. As you've probably seen in the last few weeks, we have a newborn in the House of Assembly. And it's things like that that our government has been doing to make sure that we make it as accessible and easy for young families to get involved in provincial politics. Also, we are working closely with municipal leaders in order to with roundtable discussions and other discussions, and how we can build and to support females into politics, and how we can encourage them. So it is a very important issue. Our leader, Premier Fury, has made it a priority. Our minister for the status of women has made it a priority. And we welcome any conversations that in the future with municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, and how we can improve on that.
Thank you very much, Minister Bennett. All right, we're going to hand it over to Mr. Crosby.
Oh, thanks, Sheila. I can see you're a strict enforcer of the time limits.
Well, I cut him a little bit short because he paused the last time, and I thought he was done. So I said, well, I'll let him go and finish his last statement this time, in all fairness. So.
Well, again, this is a great question. And, encouraging diversity and people of diverse backgrounds to enter politics, in particular municipal politics, where let's face it, other than personal satisfaction, the rewards are not great, in municipal in particular. People do it for the love of their communities and the love of their neighbors and families and friends. So how can we encourage that? And I think one way we can encourage it on the provincial level, you already have a system of fixed date elections on the municipal level, and I've not heard any complaints about it. Who do you know wants to go back to elections being called at the whim of the mayor, for example? I don't think anyone wants that. But on the provincial level, we have that. So I think it would encourage greater diversity if people could lay plans around their families in particular, as well as their careers, so that they know when the election date is and they can organize their lives around it. That will help women and also young people enter public life. Another suggestion is, and I know that all of your members and your municipal leaders practice this, but it's civility in political debate. And people need to be collegial, people need to be civil, polite, respectful, not call each other names, and engage in a discourse, a political discourse, which is respectful and aims at getting to the best solution to all of our problems. And those are some suggestions I'd make about that. And I challenge Premier Fiore now to implement a fixed date election law for the coming election.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crosby. Last but certainly not least, Allison.
Thank
What's
you.
your thoughts?
A little bit of lived experience here. Some very good thoughts on this. I don't know if you've been listening to some of the statements in the House of Assembly, but we recently had 2 new appointees or elected officials in the Equal Voice movement here in Newfoundland and Labrador, which advocates for women in politics. So I think in helping them engage in municipalities and maybe having chapters throughout the province, I think would be very helpful because they are an excellent conduit. We also need to talk a little bit about what Mr. Crosby had alluded to. Snap elections hurt women. Women often need a longer lead time to make sure that their children are going to be taken care of and they can raise a little bit more money and just to prepare the day-to-day stuff, because women often take on a disproportionate role in taking care of day-to-day things.
Something.
But wait, there's more. We need to put more funding down for women. Women have more difficulty accessing additional fundraising, so we need to make that a little bit more accessible. Putting funding in place for childcare, because quite often a woman cannot find someone to take care of their child, so maybe a little bit of funding for things like that. Let's all together. This is not something a provincial government can dictate. Together, we must stand up against harassment and discrimination, and we need to make that very clear that it is not appropriate in any situation. So that's some broad scopes things. To narrow down some things, some practical things, if we want different people represented from different parts of the community, reach out to their groups. If you have an LGBTQSII plus, I think I have them all right. Sorry if I didn't. Reach out to those groups in your community and say, come, I want you to be engaged. This is what politics is like. Have civics courses there. Have more volunteer opportunities in your municipalities. I took my niece to work the other day and I put her in the scrum room. And I said, look at all these light cameras. It's very intimidating. Make that easier for women. Sorry.
Thank you, Allison. All right. So that concludes our formal questions. We have covered a lot of ground, and thank you very much for your responses. So now what I want to do is I want to provide you with an opportunity to provide some closing remarks. And again, it's only 2 minutes. So we'll start off with you, Mr. Pelly.
First of all, thank you again, President Fitzgerald, for inviting me to be a part of this evening. Thank you to the other 3 members of the panel. I want to say I appreciate you putting yourself out there to serve the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. And no matter what political stripe you may carry or whatever, it is certainly honorable to serve the people of this province. And again, thank you. But I just want to close out by saying that I believe that Newfoundland and Labrador is resilient. I believe that we are strong. I believe that we are going to come through this situation we're in fiscally and with the COVID pandemic. I believe we're going to come out stronger than we were before. But I also want to point out there, especially to the president of MNL, keep pushing as hard as you can for a voice at the table. Keep pushing as hard as you can to get the provincial government moving on regionalization. I know sometimes we look at every reason why we don't want to do this. Maybe there's a little fear of losing a little bit of power at the top or whatever, but I believe that decisions being made in municipalities and in regions of our province need to be made and need to be brought to the forefront by regional governments that know the areas, that know the people, know the needs, know what's available to you in resources, whether it's people, whether it's natural resources or whatever. But I am a firm believer that the quicker we get this moving, but we got to do it right. We've got to collaborate with the people that would be affected by this. But I believe regionalization will work for Newfoundland and Labrador. It will make us stronger. It will unite us more, and it will give us a bright future for everyone that wants to be here and live, and for our children.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pelly. All right, Ms. Coffin, we'll go over to your closing statement.
Thank you very much. And it has been an absolute pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you. Just to summarize some of the things we've chatted about already, where do we need to be going economically? The 2 points that I made in particular that should guide all of our decision making is keep more dollars in our province and have a more even distribution of that income. I think that is absolutely vital and should be a guiding premise upon which we make all of our decisions. I think that what are strategically moving with infrastructure, I think cooperating with municipalities on what needs to be done, where it needs to be done, and when it needs to be done needs to be absolutely vital and paramount in these decision making. I do believe that we need to force the federal government, if they are going to impose regulation on us, they need to back that up with additional funding, and I will strongly advocate for that. Let's see if I can do this quickly. How will we get a seat at the table? Invite you in and talk to you and listen to your suggestions. Municipalities have to implement the legislation, make sure that they contribute to the development of that legislation, so the implementation will be easy and smooth and it works for absolutely everyone. And lacking diversity, again, we need to reach out to marginalized groups. We need to engage them. Go out and specifically say, hey, I think you would be a good candidate. Come and see what this process is like and ingratiate them into the process and let them become familiar with it. And then it becomes less intimidating. And I think that's a very reasonable way to start. I mean, remember, there's 500,000 of us. Chances are, if I went around this room, we're related, or you know where my family is, or someone will be related. So we are all in this together. We must work together to find a solution to all of this. And I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coffin. Okay, Mr. Crosby.
Well, thanks, Sheila. And thanks for the others who commented. Our communities are fundamentally our municipalities, and our municipalities thrive when they have dedicated people like yourself, like your board of directors, like all your members who are working in the interests of the folks who live in those communities to make their lives better. But they need the resources to work with, and they need to have the ear of the levels of government with which they have to interact and deal with. And I just bring you back to the fact that what we need is a vibrant economy. We have a vibrant economy when we have investment that creates jobs, when we have investment, for example, in the offshore that creates jobs, when the government, the provincial government, is paying attention to the problems that confront us, like at Come By Chance oil refinery, like at the offshore, is paying attention, is on top of the file, is advocating for us in places like Ottawa, which is so important, which is, and we have a national government which is not hostile to our greatest source of jobs and provincial revenue and economy, which is the offshore. So we need all those things. And when we have those things in place, I agree with Graydon that we're a resilient people. But resiliency alone is not enough to do it. We need resiliency, which we have, with a plan for economic recovery, and with the determination to advocate and champion the interests of this province and of all the municipalities in this province in the places where it matters. And that's why I'm saying, as Premier, I'll be the Premier for the municipalities of this province.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crosby. All right, last but certainly not least, Minister Bennett, your closing remarks.
Well, thank you, President Fitzgerald, again. And being last is normal for me. I'm from a family of 15 children, so I was, and I'm the youngest, so I usually did come last with most things. But I just want to take a quick opportunity to say thank you for being a part of this leadership panel here tonight on behalf of Premier Fury. I'd like to thank you personally, President Fitzgerald, your board members and staff, for all the work you've done throughout the year. And also with this event that you're hosting your annual general meeting virtually. And obviously, it come with some new challenges this year, but I think you tackled them head on and done a fantastic job, and I commend you for that. I'd also like to show my appreciation to the other members, Mr. Crosby, Ms. Coffin, and Mr. Pelly, for sharing your views and feedback and all the great ideas that was put forward, and surely we'll take some back. I'd like to thank all the municipal leaders that have joined virtually, taking their time on a weekend to take part in this session. That is commendable. We have almost 2,000 municipal leaders throughout the province that give so freely of their time and show the dedication to making sure our communities and our province grow and prosper. As the minister responsible for municipalities, I look forward to continuing a positive working relationship with municipalities in Newfoundland and Labrador and other stakeholders to advance important issues for municipalities and the residents within our communities. And so I just want to wish you a very successful conference. I look forward tomorrow to taking part in the town hall session with a number of other my minister colleagues. And hopefully people will continue to view in tomorrow. And I'll give you a little heads up that we're going to be shedding a little good news on some other programs coming forward that will help municipalities. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right. Thank you very much. And I want to say sincerely, it's great that we were able to ask you guys to come and that you actually showed up here at our AGM, which is one of the most important events for us every year. So thank you so much. And so tonight, for those who might be joining us a little bit late, we've had Minister Derek Bennett, Chess Crosby, Alison Coffin, Graydon Pelly join us online by Zoom. And it's been a great conversation, certainly lots of food for thought. And so we appreciate your remarks by far. For our listeners, it's been a very, very full day. We've had many, many sessions, lots of great feedback. We hope that you're going to be up early tomorrow morning because we're starting bright and early at 8:45 with our President's Report and our Finance Report. So lots of good stuff to come yet. So stay tuned. For tonight, I encourage you to stick around. We have what's called our Shed Party happening next. It's going to be fun. Make things a little bit light because we've talked about a lot of heavy subjects today. And that we're going to have Matt Wright and singer-songwriter Sean Patton joining us. So it should be a lot of fun. We had him here last year. It was great. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you very much.